Good morning. My name is Bill Collette. I'm the CEO of the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, an organization that has served the Valley for 55 years. We represent the entire business community, supported by membership of more than 300 local businesses. I'd like to acknowledge that we are hosting these interviews on the unceded territory of the Hupecheset and Sashat First Nations, and we thank and respect them for their ongoing courtesy to us. I'd also like to confirm that these interviews, while hosted by ourselves, are supported by the Alberni Valley News, who will assist in video distribution, and by the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, who have provided us with funding so that we can distribute the videos more widely. Our chamber also operates the Visitor Centre in Port Alberni under a fee-for-service agreement with the City of Port Alberni. We're licensed to do so from Destination BC. In normal years, we would welcome more than 25,000 people from all over the world to this building, and we'd connect with that many again through our various external operations. In 2020, just prior to the pandemic, we signed an agreement with the City of Port Alberni to operate commercial activities at the McLean Mill National Historic Site, and these operations are considered by us as a social enterprise, thus we're in business for the good of everyone. We consider ourselves unique in the chamber world in that we ventured into this sort of program well before others had similar ideas on their radar. Filming this today is one of our newer employees, Mr. Richard Spencer. Richard is a local fellow who attends Alberni District Secondary School. He is entering grade 12 and is working toward a career in film. May I take a moment now to introduce Richard via a comment received just this week from a couple who reside in the Windsor area of Ontario, and I quote, "Thank you for organizing our tour at McLean Mill yesterday. Richard, our tour guide, was the most welcoming, pleasant, knowledgeable, and courteous young man. He made our experience at the mill a lasting memory. He's a keeper. We wish him every success in his future endeavors," and that's from Pam and Larry, again from Windsor, Ontario. So now I'd like to introduce our guest here today, and really he doesn't really need a whole lot of introduction. His name is Gord Johns. Gord has represented the Courtenay Alberni area for the last 6 years. And no matter what color shirt one wears, it would be tough to criticize Gord for his efforts over those years. I had the good fortune of meeting Gord in 2013 for the first time when he and I met alongside others in the BC Chamber world. At the time, Gord was the Executive Director of the Tofino District Chamber of Commerce, a position that he was acknowledged for by the BC Chamber with one of their prestigious awards. I admired him quickly. A couple of things about Gord. He supported an initiative of ours in 2017 called the Triconic Challenge. This was an event conceived by us as a major event for Canada's 150-year celebrations. We received a handsome grant to develop that event, and more importantly, we were thrilled to have our MP participate in 2 of our 3 events. Gord rode his bike from the Harbour Quay to China Creek Marina on day 2 of the event. Many people are nervous of driving there. On day 3 of the event, Gord took part in the first ever open water swim offered in our area. I don't recall what distance he swam, but he did look a little spent when he exited the water along with dozens of other people. It's not uncommon to see Gord around town wearing one of his Triconic t-shirts. More recently, Gord supported our bike seat initiative for the McLean Mill National Historic Site, and he of course always ensures that we receive adequate funding to hire youth through our annual youth employment grants, people like Richard Spencer. We welcome Gord here today.
Great. Well, thanks, Bill. Thanks, Richard, for having me here today at the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce on the unceded lands of the Hupecheset and Sashat people, not only where we're working, but where I get to live as well. And I want to acknowledge them for also the important work they're doing in our communities. I'm Gord Johns. I'm asking for you to re-elect me as a Member of Parliament for Courtenay Alberni. I was the first member of parliament in 25 years to live on our side of the hump in the Alberni Valley, elected in 2015, and I'm the only candidate that actually lives in the Alberni Valley in this 2021 federal election. We know that Canada is turning the corner at one of the most difficult times that most of us have lived through. COVID-19 has taught us to put aside our differences and to overcome our greatest challenges. For the last 2 years, I've worked hard for the people of Courtenay, Alberni by reaching out across party lines to find solutions and to do politics differently. As NDP small business and tourism critic, I rose in the House of Commons more than any other opposition MP to advocate for local businesses, our community, and for their workers throughout this whole pandemic. And as the critic for Fisheries and Oceans, I've spoken more frequently than any other MP in history on saving Pacific wild salmon. Through these efforts, I've helped change federal policy and to get action. And over my 6 years as the Member of Parliament, I've successfully introduced motions on ocean plastics, protecting veterans' benefits, and investing in active transportation infrastructure such as bike lanes and trails. And I've worked hard with local governments to achieve 14 times the annual infrastructure investment in our riding than the previous 10 years of Conservative Party representation. Together we faced the pandemic, and now it's time to face other issues: affordable housing, childcare, and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. It's time for Canadians to stop having to choose between life-saving medication and feeding their families, to be able to see a dentist regardless of their income, and to have their own family doctor. But without a healthy environment, we can't achieve any of those things. I believe in the science that says that climate change is, the climate crisis is really the defining issue of our time. It's time to reduce carbon emissions, transition to renewable energy, create well-paying sustainable jobs, and preserve our ancient rainforests as much as we can. And if I'm privileged to gain your trust once again on election day, I'll continue to fight to protect the values of our coastal communities and for the future of our planet. Because if COVID has taught us anything, it's that change is possible. We're stronger together, and everyone matters. Please go to www.reelectgord.ca for more information or to join my campaign. Thank you very much.
Okay, our first question here today is, what action or actions will your party take on the poison drug crisis, the opioid overdose crisis in our community and most others?
Since 2015, over 20,000 lives have been lost to a poison drug supply. We know that we constantly hear from federal politicians, from various different political parties, that they understand now, finally, that this is a health crisis and they want to take a different approach. We saw in COVID-19, those same politicians rely on medical health professionals for guidance throughout the crisis to help them design policy to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. Yet when it comes to the opioid crisis, those same medical health officers are giving recommendations that they want the federal government to declare a public health emergency. 20,000 lives have been lost, and the government still has not declared a public health emergency, unlike the province of BC, which has done so already. They need to end the stigma and decriminalize drugs, take the approach of other countries like Portugal, which had the highest overdose rate in Europe and now has the lowest, by taking an approach through decriminalization, therapeutic treatment centers, wraparound supports, and ensuring everybody has stable, secure housing. And obviously providing a clean source for those that are, using a tainted drug supply. And we need to invest heavily in mental health and addictions. The cost of treatment is much cheaper than what this crisis is costing us and costing lives. We need politicians to have courage. That's what I'm going to be pushing for and have been pushing for in Ottawa. And people can count on me to fight this fight if I'm sent back to Ottawa.
Our second question here today is, Canadian Maritime Engineering, with offices in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Ontario, and British Columbia, including Port Alberni, is working closely with the Port Alberni Port Authority, one of 17 Canadian port authorities, to develop and operate a much-needed floating dry dock in the Port Alberni Deep Sea Harbour. CME has also engaged support from community partners, including the City of Port Alberni, ourselves at the Chamber of Commerce, and others, to help facilitate the concept. There is significant lack of capacity to service current marine and coastal needs, emphasized by an obvious loss of business opportunity to the US, Mexico, and further abroad markets. The benefits to the marine and shipping industries are obvious, as are the social, economic, and environmental outcomes of a successful build of a new dry dock in Port Alberni. So the question is, what will you do and your party do, if elected, to achieve the funding support necessary to build the floating dry dock in Port Alberni?
Well, I'm so excited about a floating dry dock here in Port Alberni. We know how important it is in terms of an opportunity. We've got plenty of skilled tradespeople. I've been promoting this project over the last few years. In fact, I invited Mark Collins from BC Ferries to come and see firsthand the opportunity. He wrote a letter of support which helped us get funding from the province of BC, who I helped engage to do an economic impact benefits assessment of the project. That has helped lifted this idea to the province, who needs to, who supports the project. And I've talked to our MLA Josie Osborne and our obviously great mayor and council here in Port Alberni. We've all identified this as the #1 economic development opportunity for our region. This would be great for our labor force, for many different things, but we've seen governments in the past, both conservative and liberal governments, eliminate a 25% tariff for shipbuilding, despite the fact that we are running out of dry dock space between Oregon and Alaska. There's a huge shortage. This is a great opportunity for us to fill that gap and to stop doing refits for BC Ferries, for example, in Poland and in Turkey. Those jobs belong here. They belong in the Alberni Valley. We've got a great partner with the Port Alberni Port Authority, and I'm going to do everything I can to get that project shovel ready and ensure that it gets the support that it needs.
It is widely acknowledged by the BC fishing communities that DFO has lost touch with them. This was in clear evidence over the past week, with many commercial boats anchored in our harbor who were permitted fishing rates prior to the largest annual fishing derby for recreational fishers on the island. The commercial boats anchor but do not contribute in any way to the local or even island communities, whereas the sports fishers do. The results of the recent salmon derby were disappointing for many, due largely to an unexpected opening prior to the weekend. Non-selective catch of salmon and steelhead by commercial boats, especially in terminal areas, must be eliminated or transitioned to selective fishing technologies to conserve wild salmon and steelhead stocks. The question we have is, as our representative in Ottawa, would you require DFO to immediately shift to a marked selective fisheries by marking all of our hatchery-produced Chinook and Coho salmon? Would you move to restructure and rebuild DFO and its punitive community policies and rebuild our salmon resource? If so, how could local communities generate revenue from the resource so that communities that steward and maintain the resource can invest and grow from it?
Obviously, wild Pacific salmon is critical for our economy, for our culture, for our food security, for our economic well-being. That's why I've raised wild Pacific salmon in the House of Commons more than any other MP in history. And just to show in comparison, that's as much since 2015 that I've raised wild salmon as the whole entire Conservative caucus of over 100 members put together. This is a critical priority for our riding, and it needs to be on everyone's agenda. We've helped secure the largest amount of money for salmon restoration, enhancement, and to bring back wild salmon, yet the Liberals fail to deliver a timeline. We've seen Liberals and Conservatives continue to lose control over fishing because they've structured it around corporations and foreign ownership instead of First Nations and local harvesters. We need to have a model here on the West Coast like we do on the East Coast, where we have local independent fish harvesters that are actually fishing, benefiting from the resource. We need to invest in restoration and enhancement. We need to fight the fight against tackling climate change, as we know we have warming oceans. And in terms of marked select fisheries, we absolutely need to mark all our fisheries like Washington and Oregon have been doing. and work with First Nations in terms of harvesting and how we move forward. But really, if we're going to implement the Pacific Salmon strategy initiative, we need it to be led by government to government to government. That includes First Nations, and obviously invest in local management like West Coast Aquatic and ensure that we have local decision making here in our communities.
So question 4. The current COVID crisis, and more importantly, the responses directed at it, are causing a significant level of backlash across all populations, be it the general public, small and medium-sized businesses, and even local governments. The problem is exacerbated by the frequent changes to provincial policies, which often differ across the country. This has led to a level of uncertainty never seen in our lifetimes, resulting in business closures, fire sales of businesses, employment challenges across every sector, and unfortunately, it appears to have led to a widening of the gap between those that have, those that thought they had, let alone those that don't have. What will you do, if elected, to ensure the business community that the uncertainty of today will not continue to repeat itself, thus enabling them to restart their businesses with a level of confidence that they can open the doors tomorrow and the next day?
This is an incredibly difficult time. I can't even imagine the challenges small businesses are going through. I was a small business owner in 2008 during the peak of the recession, and I know full well what it's like to go through a difficult time, but that doesn't even pale in comparison to what businesses are facing through COVID-19. At the time, the Conservatives did nothing for small business. They bailed out big corporations, CEOs, and the big banks. I fought very hard to ensure that small businesses get supports, whether it be the wage subsidy, the rent assistance program, ensuring that we have supports for workers as well throughout this crisis. But small businesses owners, they need to know that we're going to be in it for them and their workers. We need paid sick days so that people aren't going to make the choice of whether they're going to go to work sick and potentially infect other workers. We also need to create comfort and security for workers that are afraid to go back to work because they're afraid to get sick. We need to ensure that those workers are protected. So we need to get people vaccinated. That's going to be the number one priority, is getting people vaccinated so that we can protect workers. We can create confidence for those that are immune compromised or those that are afraid to get sick, especially our seniors, and to do everything we can to protect our hospitals, healthcare workers, teachers and students at our schools, and again, so we don't end up in another lockdown. So it's critical that people get out and get vaccinated, and we need to extend emergency support programs for those businesses so they have support should there be another lockdown or restrictions in place, and until they get back up on their feet again.
Question 5. The West Coast supply chain and transportation system is inefficient and ineffective as it continues to be choked by exponential congestion in the Lower Mainland. Canadians appear to be unaware of the fact that because of the high cost of land in the Lower Mainland and congestion throughout the road network, that most international goods are loaded onto trucks, then transported to Calgary area distribution centers, only to be shipped back to Metro Vancouver for eventual redistribution to the end user. This has resulted in higher costs for the manufacturer, with those costs passed along to the consumer, and perhaps more importantly, the cost to the environment can only be described as enormous. These costs are stifling Vancouver Island's ability to grow and transform its economy, making exporting finished products increasingly uncompetitive for its more than 800,000 residents. So the question is, what do you, if elected, propose to do to improve and invest in the transportation and supply chain model to continue to encourage Vancouver Island ingenuity, economic competitiveness, and reduce the significant and often ignored environmental impacts?
We know that transportation is one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases, so we need to do everything we can to create more efficiencies in terms of our transportation networks. We've got great leaders here in the Alberni Valley. Obviously, the Port Authority is innovative. They're trying to pursue projects like the PATH project to create more efficiencies, something that I'm supportive of. Of course, we want to get that floating dry dock up and running first. The Alberni Valley Regional District, and the importance of them working collectively, whether it be getting seafood to market that is timely. Also, we're seeing the port working with groups like the Sand Group, who are investing $50 to $60 million on Berth 3, so we can ship products that are manufactured right here in the Alberni Valley, direct to market. This is the kind of innovation that we need. Ensuring that we're supportive as the province and the local governments move forward with the ENN railway and how they decide to pursue moving forward, and ensuring that we're supportive of workers, getting them the training. We saw the recent challenges through the route to Banfield, that we don't have enough mariners trained to be able to support a marine transportation sector here in Canada. So we need to ensure that we're filling those gaps and ensuring those labour market challenges, and doing everything we can to work collectively with Vancouver Islanders, especially with the opportunity of a foreign trade zone. We are needing to work with our partners in Nanaimo and other places on the island to create more and more efficiencies, something that I'm always excited to be working with those partners and in support of their initiatives.
Question 6. The Canada-British Columbia Expert Panel on the Future of Housing Supply and Affordability released their final report in June of 2021. The question: how will you work towards implementing the report's recommendations, such as making new infrastructure investments conditional on official community plans, zoning bylaws, and other local policies to allow for increased density and a mix of housing types?
So when it comes to density and it comes to zoning bylaws, that falls squarely on local government, which is under the purview of the provincial government. However, the federal government does play an incredibly important role. We saw in the 70s and 80s them embark on a very robust co-op housing model, social housing, investments in non-market housing. And at the time, 10% of our housing in Canada was non-market housing, which was a great model for those. I grew up in co-op housing, so I know full well. My dad was a transmission mechanic, my mother worked as a clerk, and we helped in our co-op offset some of the costs to seniors, people living with disabilities, those on income assistance. Really healthy, safe, secure, and affordable housing for everybody. Great model. The federal government pulled out of the National Housing Strategy, the Liberal government of the day, in 1993. And the Conservatives completely believe that free market will solve all our housing problems. That's never happened anywhere in the world. In fact, in Europe, 30% of their housing is non-market. Today, 30 years later almost, since the Liberals pulled out of the National Housing Strategy, we're at 3% non-market housing. We need non-market housing to help those that are most vulnerable. Certainly, we have a homelessness issue that is overrepresented by Indigenous peoples who need an urban, rural, and Indigenous-led strategy so that we can solve those issues. The government's also identified veterans, and we have veterans that are homeless that have served our country. That's completely unacceptable. Those are things that I'm working on solving, but also for workers. We got to ensure all workers have safe, secure housing. And this is a huge issue, and we need to make sure that the federal government stops downloading on local governments and comes to the table. The provincial government is building half of the non-market housing in our country. They need a federal partner, and the time is now. People are in a crisis. We've seen real estate go up 30% in our riding. People are being forced out onto the streets. This is completely unacceptable, and we need to solve this issue immediately, and we need the government to invest in non-market housing, not more tax breaks for developers. Those housing units will not end up being they will not be affordable for people. So this is an issue that I see as a huge priority in our riding.
So an additional question that came to us is this one. Since this riding had 3 residential schools, including Alberni, Ahousaht, and Christie, and is home to a large First Nations population impacted by those schools, what actions would you or your party, you and your party, take to move truth and reconciliation with local First Nations forward?
Thanks for the question, and it's a very important question. You know, we all understand that our country has had horrific policies against Indigenous peoples, and this is, just a legacy that has stolen the lives of children. I was fortunate to attend the Reclaiming Lost Souls event at the Alberni Indian Residential School in 2019. You hear firsthand the stories of survivors about kids not coming home from family members, and we need to do everything we can to move forward with reconciliation, to move forward with implementing the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls calls to justice, the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. But most importantly, right now, the Indigenous communities in our riding who I've met with all around this issue, where the Indian residential schools were placed, these schools were built, as Nasiamus Ross, Sasak councillor, said, by the churches and the government, and they found the resources to build them. They need to find the resources to remove them, to rebuild healing centers, to support them through their healing in the way that they decide is best for them. But they need truth first. They need to ensure that they find out, what grave sites are there, what happened, and have some accountability. And they need the government to, declare that this was a genocide, and to take action and get to the bottom of the concerns of each of the nations as they decide to pursue moving forward. I'll be supportive of that. I've been supportive of the nations in terms of ensuring that there is resources available to them to get to the truth. And we're all in this together. All Canadians need to learn about this. I know that the Conservative leader, Erin O'Toole, wanted to lower the flags. It's not time to do that. We can't just turn the page and forget. We need to take this as a top priority, and we need to keep the flags down until Indigenous peoples tell us it's time to raise them. And this should be serving us all as a reminder about the critical work we all have to do in terms of reconciling the failed policies of the past and the genocide that took place in our country. First, I want to thank everybody, all of the voters, for participating in democracy. I want to thank the people of Courtenay Alberni for putting their trust in me, both in 2015 and 2019. I ran in 2015 because I was concerned about the damage the Conservatives were having on our country. They attacked veterans by cutting Veterans Affairs by a third. They gutted fisheries protections. They cut fisheries officers. They failed to protect wild salmon. We're seeing the cost of that. They set targets on climate change that were far below other countries, and they failed to meet them. They attacked seniors, wanted them to work longer. They fought Indigenous people in court. They failed to get investments into our riding when we needed them. And this is just the beginning of the list that motivated me to run for politics. I was worried about our coast, and I still am. We have a lot of work to do. The contrast is, we know that Justin Trudeau invested $900 million more in subsidizing oil and gas since he started. He's failed to deal with the health transfers that the Conservatives cut in the decades past, which is eroding our healthcare system, which we saw in long-term care, and the failure to address the various needs in mental health and addictions in our country. I'll be fighting to ensure that we have a safe, secure healthcare system where people aren't having to make a choice of whether they're going to have medicine or food. We can have a national pharmacare plan. We can make sure everybody gets to the dentist and gets the support they need, and that we can tackle climate change and create good jobs in our communities, especially in Courtenay Alberni, where we know climate change is having an impact on wild salmon in our forests and our oceans. And we saw that just recently with smoky skies and the heating of our communities that impacted our local aquaculture, basically roasting our coastline. I'm calling on you to support me and get behind me and continue to work with me so that I can deliver your message in Ottawa. And we know what's at stake in this election. There's so many really important critical issues, and we know that New Democrats are always going to put people at the center of all of our policies. As we've shown in COVID, we're going to continue to do that. People have a choice between Liberals and Conservatives, who we know stand up for the ultra-rich, that don't want to make Amazon and the super rich that benefited from this pandemic pay their fair share. We're going to ensure that they do. We're going to ensure that it's not on the backs of everyday people in our communities, and that they get the benefits that they deserve and the action and investments that we need in our communities to build more resiliency, to ensure that we have a more fair, and a community that we can be proud of, especially for future generations. I want to thank you for, again, supporting me in 2015 and 2019, and I'm asking you to support me to go back to Ottawa, to continue our fight, and to deliver our important message so that we get the support we need to take action on these very important issues.
Gord, I want to thank you for joining us this morning and for your preparation. It was very, very good. Appreciate that. On behalf of the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, the Alberni Valley News, who are going to help us distribute this video, and the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, who are supporting us financially to do so, I want to thank you again and wish you good luck in the upcoming election. We want to encourage the populace to get out and vote. We want to encourage the populace to get out and get the jab in the arm, and so that we can move forward and in a healthy, prosperous environment. Thanks again for joining us, and good luck.